All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics, except not exactly this afternoon. We're looking at the Hurricane Dorian right here, but we are talking more today in this video about evacuations and questions regarding that. That's something I get a lot is people asking if they should leave or if they should stay or what they should do, or they have friends in an area and if they should leave. And it's a question I'm not really comfortable with because as a forecaster, I can, try to tell you the best representation of what you should expect with weather conditions in your area, but I'm not super qualified to make that decision for you and your family. There's a lot that goes into an evacuation. What kind of house you're in, who lives in it, where it is, and a multitude of other questions that simply I wouldn't have the scope or knowledge to be able to make an informed decision about. But I understand that no will one person can make that answer, and it's a very tough one. It's very anxiety inducing. I live in Jacksonville. I've lived here my whole life. I know all about these storms, not only as a forecaster, but as a native Floridian. I mean, I get it. They're stressful. We had to evacuate for Irma and Matthew in my area. I live near Jacksonville, and it's rough. I fully understand the anxiety and the frustration, even more so because this is supposed to be something I'm really good at, and sometimes these things do their own thing, and it's frustrating. So I get it. I get the issues here. But what I want to talk to you guys a little bit about today is evacuations and try to answer that question at least a little bit. Okay. So number one, when we're talking about evacuations, is water versus wind. Okay. You run from water and you hide from wind. In every hurricane in the recorded history of time, water has killed more people than wind has. As scary as wind is, and as big of a deal as we make wind out to be, wind is a symptom and not a cause. Okay, is wind is what everyone focuses on, but there are documentations of some of the strongest hurricanes that have ever hit where people were, you know, moved out of their house and like their clothes were like sandblasted off their back, but they survived. What mostly kills people in these storms is water. Water is what kills people, okay? So the number one thing you have to think about is water. We'll start with storm surge, okay? Storm surge is what we're talking about where the water at the coast physically rises. The storm pushes water on shore with those very strong winds will literally pick up and push water on shore. So this is a good graphic from the Weather Channel. They had a virtual reality video. If you want to YouTube it, it's a really good one. But 6 foot of storm surge. This guy's probably about 5'10". This is a 6 foot storm surge at the beach. This is the ocean is now 6 foot higher and it's on your street. Okay, so at the immediate coastline, storm surge is your biggest threat, far and away, and especially with a storm like Dorian, who has the potential to produce a massive storm surge of probably 15 or more feet. At the coastline, you have to leave within a few miles of the coast. There's no debate about it. You've got to get out. This is an absolutely incredibly dangerous place to be. Water has a tremendous amount of power to it, and it is by far what kills people the most at the coast and what does the most damage at the coastline. So as you think about your evacuations, number one is that. Number two is then wind. If you're safe for water, I'm sorry, let me back up. Besides storm surge, creek flooding, river flooding, okay, looking at the rainfall totals expected from Dorian, 16 inches, 17 inches, 25 inches. And I'm sure as this storm gets closer and model clarity gets a little higher, these totals could go up. I mean, we could be talking about at least a foot of rain for everybody and more than a foot of rain for some people. So think about creeks and areas around your house or bodies of water that may flood. If you live near a creek that floods during a strong tropical storm or even just a regular afternoon thunderstorm, you need to be seriously thinking about leaving, getting away from that creek, getting away from that body of water that may be 2 or 3 times the size it is right now. I mean, there are creeks that flood crazy amounts of flooding. So don't be the one that thinks, okay, well, I don't live at the beach, so I don't have to leave. Um, and then you go to wind. And from here, I can go ahead and talk about the evacuation zone. So every county, about half the counties in Florida have evacuation zones. Most of the coastal counties do. This is actually a list of counties that do and don't. So these are all the counties that do. If you want to pause the video or look up this website, this is just floridadisaster.org/know-your-zone. These are all the counties that have evacuation zones preset based off of areas. And then there are ones that don't, which are down here, but these counties are mostly inland counties that don't have to deal with the beaches. So I'm going to show you my county, which is St. Johns County, and this is all based off of water, guys. All these evacuation zones you see, these aren't just somebody with Microsoft Paint and a paint bucket just randomly filling stuff in. I mean, these are all based off of water. So the Intercoastal Waterway runs right through the eastern part of the county, east of I-95 and east of A1A, and all these areas are an evacuation zone because if we were to get a large storm surge rise of water and onshore winds, this will back up water and cause water rise and flooding in these areas. That's why all these areas are under evacuation zones. Also, on the western side of the county, we have things like creeks near State Road 16 and the creeks near Passetti's Fish Camp and Passetti Road. These are notorious creeks that flood very often. Every year we see the fish camp down there that floods, and they have like watermarks on the walls because it floods so often. It's almost like a joke because it does it every time we get any sort of storm. So, those kind of areas that are prone to flooding, Black Creek up in Jacksonville, these are all areas that flood all the time. And if you live in one of them, you definitely want to consider leaving, especially when you see rainfall forecasts over a foot. That is a tremendous, exponential, and rare amount of rain. So that's something you definitely want to think about regarding your decision to leave or stay. If you aren't in an evacuation zone and you're not near the coast, then what? Well, it comes down to your family, your property, and your home. Okay, and that is something I can't really tell you much more about. If your home it was built in the 60s and it's rickety and old, or it's an old mobile home, you probably want to think about leaving if the forecasts are calling for a strong tropical storm to a hurricane. That's probably not where you want to be. If you're in a well-built house or you're, on high ground or something like that, then you maybe can stay. Not everyone can leave in these storms. Everyone thinks, oh, why doesn't the entire state just evacuate? Well, you can't evacuate 20 million people from the peninsula of Florida. It just doesn't work like that because everyone's got to go north. So if you in some of these areas that aren't in evacuation zones, you have a decently well-built house, then you can probably stay. Then you want to consider any other factors like maybe your family's health. If you have someone with significant health concerns, or something where they have to go to the hospital, like dialysis or something, just as an example, then you may want to think about relocating somewhere closer to a hospital or somewhere you can treat those issues. But if everyone's kind of healthy and you're in a nice house and you're away from the evacuation zones and potential flood threats, you can probably stay. But then if you're going to stay, you have to think about what you're going to do in the event of that. And that is comes down to being prepared. The water and bread. We make the jokes on Facebook with the memes and stuff, but having supplies to be self-sufficient for a few days. At the end of the day, you have to think, if I can't leave my house and I do not have power for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, how am I going to survive? Do I have enough water? Uh, Things like Brian Norcross talks about in his post here, filling Ziploc bags full of water and freezing them. If they melt, you've got water. If they don't, you got ice. And if the storm doesn't hit, oh well, you wasted some plastic bags. Having gas in your car, getting some cash on you. If stores' credit card machines aren't working, you can still purchase some supplies, some local stores. They start getting their lights back on. Filling your prescription, washing all your clothes and dishes before you lose power that night before the storm. Having photos of your rooms or your houses if you need to file insurance claims. Getting rabbit ears to your TV or having a weather radio handy. TV stations will simulcast on radio stations, so if you can't watch your favorite meteorologist from the local TV station, you can at least hear them. I'm telling you, it's very comforting. Even for someone like me who is a meteorologist, it's very comforting hearing a familiar voice talking about the storm if I don't have a lot of access to my information and to my internet. Knowing if you're in an evacuation zone, we talked about that. Parking your car somewhere. I can tell you just in the things we do around here, filling your bathtubs are important for just having toilet water and things like that. We buy a lot of these 55-gallon drums. We have a ton of these in our yard, and we fill these full of water. You can also put fuel in them if you want to buy a bunch of gas for your generator. These are very useful. I showered out of one of these for a week after Irma, and it was the best shower I've ever had in my freaking life. Trust me. Other things like that, having gas for your generator, just being generally ready and being self-sufficient. That's the name of the game. So what it comes down to, bottom line, guys, is this. One, if you're in an evacuation zone, there's a reason you are. It's water, and you should leave. No debate about it, period. If you are not in an evacuation zone, but you still have serious concerns regarding your property, maybe there's trees around your house. That's always my concern at my house is trees. Or your house is simply old or a little, rickety or whatever the case may be, or if you have family members that have health problems, you should still highly consider leaving. And if you do, if you're on the fence, if you're thinking, oh, I don't know, maybe I should, there's probably a reason in the back of your mind why you should, and you should listen to it, and you probably should at least get somewhere safer than wherever you are at the current place in time. If so far these questions have all been answered pretty reliably, then well, you're probably good to stay. And if you're good to stay, just make sure you're hunkered down and you're ready and you're following some basic common sense rules. Don't put your generator inside. Have gas for it. Be prepared to stay where you are, of course, during the storm, but even a little bit after, as winds are still high and things could still fall. Power lines. Don't be driving around too much, guys. You know all that other stuff, but uh, that's what it comes down to is if you're going to stay, be prepared to be self-sufficient. And if you leave, be prepared to be away from your property for a few days. These storms are notorious for people trying to get back immediately after the storm, like 5 minutes after it stops raining. Everyone wants to get right back to their house, understandably, but roads are clogged, they're congested, there's trees, there's debris, it's not safe. Officials are trying to move around and get to the places that need help, and it makes everything worse when everyone tries to come back. So if you leave, don't expect to come back for about 3 hours after the storm passes. You're going to have to maybe stay where you are for a day or two until the roads can open back up and we can get people safely back. So if you are going to leave your property, have that in the back of your mind and be prepared to do that. So hopefully that at least kind of answers some questions. I know it's not all encompassing and it's far away from should be. At the end of the day, it is your decision for you and your family, and only you can make that. And if you're informed, if you look everything up, you will make the best decision for your family. I promise, because no one else can make that for you. So just trust in what you read, trust in yourself to make a right decision, and you'll be okay, and we'll all get through it together. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that quells some fears. And if it helps one person, well then I'm as happy as a clam. So anyway, guys, that's what I got for you in this video. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.